Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Can everybody hear me? If you're having any audio issues, you can type it in your chat window, and my lovely coworker Tina, who is organizing the webinar behind the scenes, she'll do her best to try and help you troubleshoot. So my name is Kim Lewis, and I'm an occupational health and safety educational consultant with Workplace NL. I'll be presenting today's webinar on housekeeping and 5S as part of Workplace NL's Foul Prevention Month initiatives. So I guess before we get started as well, so there will be this morning a national test of the Alert Ready system. So the National Emergency Alert System will sound off on the radio, your television, any wireless devices at 10:55 a.m. Island time and 10:25 a.m. in most parts of Labrador. So if we hear that, or if you hear that on any of your devices during the webinar, then we'll probably just take a little moment to let that noise pass, and then we'll continue on. And just to give you a little heads up there, so you don't be startled. So just a little bit about Workplace NL before we get started. So Workplace NL serves approximately 215,000 workers and 18,000 employers in the province. Workplace NL administers an employer-funded, no-fault workers' compensation system that promotes safe and healthy workplaces, that provides return-to-work programs, and offers compensation to injured workers and their dependents. Here at Workplace NL, we have a health and safety learning series, and that's a program designed and delivered by our staff to increase the education and awareness of occupational health and safety and return to work in the workplace. So the workshops and webinars that we offer address the injury priorities and fulfill the strategic mandate of Workplace NL. And I'm very happy to say that we are scheduling in-person workshops as part of our 2022 learning series. So I look forward to seeing some of you guys in person next year. So today's webinar is part of this learning series. So Prevention Services is a department within Workplace NL, and that's made up of a group of health and safety professionals that focus on promoting education in occupational health and safety, as well as awareness with employers and employees in our province. So some of the services we provide include working with employers that have high claims costs to try to help them reduce injuries at their workplace. We provide statistics on employer performance and other measures of safety. We develop occupational health and safety resources and publications, and again, these workshops and webinars that we offer. We develop training standards, we approve training curriculum, and then we also certify people who want to train in our standards. We assist committees and worker health and safety reps and designate to increase their effectiveness in their workplaces. And we provide direction to employers for the prevention of occupational disease and musculoskeletal injuries. So, and finally, before we get into it, I'll just go over some housekeeping items. So in the handouts section of your toolbar there on your right-hand side of your screen, you'll find a PDF copy of the presentation that you can download and save during the webinar. And it's important to do that while the webinar is live. Asking questions is encouraged, so if you'd like to ask me a question, you can type it into the chat window and Tina will let me know that there's questions there. I'll respond at the end of the presentation if there's time, and if we run out of time, then I'll answer your question in an email. Also, at the end of the webinar, you'll receive an evaluation, so I would encourage you to complete that, as it helps us to develop better and more meaningful webinars. And you can also include any topics that may be of interest specifically to you or to your workplace. And every 30 minutes or so, we'll take a micro break. So I'll ask you to stand and stretch to give your body an opportunity to change postures and get the blood moving throughout your body. And of course, at any point in time throughout the webinar, and if your workstation allows or your work setup, feel free to certainly get up and move around, do what works for you. So at the start of the webinar, I mentioned that today's webinar is part of the Workplace NL's Foul Prevention Month initiatives. So November is Foul Prevention Month. And Fall Prevention Month is a campaign that encourages organizations and individuals to come together to coordinate fall prevention efforts for a larger impact in their community. So here at Workplace NL, we focus our efforts on fall prevention in the workplace. So you can visit our website at workplacenl.ca to access resources to raise awareness of fall prevention in your own workplace or even in your community, and to register for the last webinar in our series, which is Hierarchy of Fall Protection. That's scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So today we'll spend some time talking about the importance of housekeeping. We'll look at an acronym, RACI, that has been used to guide the process of improving housekeeping in workplaces. The 5S process, which is a system for organizing spaces so work can be performed, efficiently, effectively, and more importantly, safely. And where companies can start, who should participate in the process, and the importance of education and training in housekeeping and 5S. And then I'll conclude the webinar by showing you some real-life examples of what implementing a 5S system in your workplace looks like. So before we get into the 5S process, I'll just start off by talking a little bit this morning about housekeeping. So Merriam-Webster defines housekeeping as, among other things, the care and management of property and the provision of equipment and services and the routine tasks that must be done in order for a system to function or to function effectively. So conversely then, or the opposite of that, poor housekeeping then would be defined as inadequate inadequate care and management of property, and inadequate or absent tasks resulting in inefficiently functioning systems. So given that definition then, it stands to reason certainly that workplaces should be concerned about the status of their housekeeping. So according to the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, or the CCOHS, housekeeping is not just about cleanliness though. It also includes keeping work areas neat and orderly, maintaining halls and floors free of slip and trip hazards, and removing of waste materials. So things like, paper and cardboard, and any fire hazards from the work areas. It also requires paying attention to important details such as, the layout of the whole workplace, the aisle marking, the spacing of the aisles, the adequacy of storage facilities, as well as maintenance. So you're probably asking yourself, why is good housekeeping important? So there are several reasons. So the first one is that, less clutter equals less stress. So studies have shown that messiness has a negative psychological effect. So according to research from Princeton University, clutter affects a person's focus and it causes them to be more distracted, which of course we know can lead to incidents in the workplace. The second reason there, a clean work area also provides a safer work environment, free from potential hazards that could contribute to injuries. So by keeping the workplace clean, you're keeping yourself and your team physically healthy and safe. The third reason there is you'll work faster and more efficiently. So cleaning improves productivity, and not only because it reduces distractions, but it provides you an opportunity to improve the workflow within your organization. It gives you the ability to uncover and address any sources of any annoying delays and errors that may be happening. The fourth reason is that it makes a good impression. So a clean and organized workplace gives employees and visitors a positive image of your organization. It indicates that your people conduct themselves professionally and that you're paying attention to details. So put yourself in an outsider's position and consider what kind of message that a messy business environment sends to them should they have to enter your workplace. But there's also another reason housekeeping is so important, and certainly here in the province, it's a big one, is that cleanliness is a Newfoundland and Labrador occupational health and safety regulatory requirement. So it is a legislative requirement. And the legislation states that an employer shall ensure that the workplace is sanitary and kept as clean as is reasonably practicable, and that accumulated dirt and refuse or waste or garbage is removed daily by a suitable method and that's removed from the floors, from the working surfaces, from the stairways and passages. Floors are cleaned at least once a week by washing, vacuuming, cleaning, or any other effective and suitable means. That interior walls and partitions, ceilings, passages, and staircases are kept in a reasonable state of repair and are suitably finished and maintained. And floors, platforms, stairs, and walkways used by workers are kept in a state of good repair and free of hazards. So again, in a nutshell, all that legalese terms just means that housekeeping practices in a workplace is a legislative requirement under our provincial occupational health and safety regulations. So like any well-planned and implemented health and safety initiative in the workplace, there are benefits that are associated with an effective housekeeping system. So good housekeeping promotes efficiency and increases productivity. So people can be more efficient if they're not tripping over things or if they know where their tools are, which of course in turn then it allows them to increase their productivity. It ensures basic practices for fire prevention. So we just talked about the legislative requirement for making sure that waste is removed. It can help control or eliminate workplace hazards. It reduces a contributing factor to workplace incidents, so fewer slip and trip incidents. Poor housekeeping has been shown to be a contributing factor to the increase of slip, trip, and fall hazards in the workplace. In fact, the majority of falls here in our province happen on the same level, resulting from slips and trips. So it could be workers tripping over loose objects on the floors or on the stairs or on platforms, or it could be workers slipping on, greasy, wet, or dirty surfaces. At the end of the day, it boils down to housekeeping. And lastly, good housekeeping supports a positive organizational culture. So how do you improve housekeeping, thereby reducing the risks of the slips, trips, and falls? As I mentioned, which is our main focus for Fall Prevention Month, would be reducing slips, trips, and falls, or fall prevention in workplaces. So how do you do that? So you set housekeeping goals or standards. You monitor then the workplace, the processes, and compliance with those standards or goals that you have set. And then you evaluate performance and make any necessary corrections. And so I'll talk a little bit more about these steps in the coming slides. So when setting your housekeeping goals or standards, you have to make sure that they're clear, that they're measurable, and that they are attainable. So what that means is that they can reasonably be achieved in the workplace. So it's no point setting lofty goals if you know that they're not going to be able to be reasonably achieved. The standards you put in place should make work easier and safer and healthier, so they shouldn't be overly complicated. And you need to assign roles, responsibilities, and accountability. So for this, you can use the acronym RACI. And so RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed. So as the name suggests then, it indicates how various activities mesh together to accomplish a given task or to complete a project or a business activity. So in this case, it would be maintaining good housekeeping. So besides clearly designating roles, the RACI model encourages greater communication at every level. So by giving equal weight to the informed role, stakeholders who may otherwise have been excluded from the conversation are brought into the loop. For example, the owner of a company should be informed of the housekeeping initiatives that are going to take place. The manager then, while not directly involved with carrying out the housekeeping tasks, should be consulted. The supervisor may be the person that's ultimately responsible for the process being completed or making sure that it's being completed. And the worker is the person who actually carries out the housekeeping tasks, so they get the job done. So like all occupational health and safety procedures, to be effective, housekeeping processes have to be monitored. So how sustainable are the processes? How, is it feasible? Is it reasonable that this level of standard, this level of housekeeping standard can be kept up and maintained? Are the processes being monitored during inspections and audits? So Is housekeeping checked as a part of your formal workplace inspection? If you participate in audit processes through any kind of recognition program, is housekeeping checked as a part of that process? Determine whether the RACIs are followed. So are the appropriate people being informed, consulted, being held accountable, and being responsible? And if the implementation of a housekeeping process is new, has consideration been given to change management? So have strategies been implemented to, affect the housekeeping change that the company wants, to control the change and then help people to adapt to that change in the workplace? And this kind of relates to when we talk about, or what we'll talk about a little bit later in the 5S system. So managing that change to a formal housekeeping system. And last up is the evaluation. So did you succeed or fail in meeting your goals? If you were successful, continue on with formalizing your housekeeping standards. And then if you weren't successful, or if you didn't quite reach that goal or achieve the standard that you wanted, so reevaluate your plan and then communicate the changes in the plan as well. So go back to the RACI, doing the consultation, informing people. All right, so the 5S process. So I've mentioned setting housekeeping goals or standards. So one system that some organizations use is called 5S, which has its origins actually in the Toyota Motor Company. So it is considered a foundational part of the Toyota production system because until the workplace, or they believe that until the workplace is clean and organized, and they won't achieve consistent good results. So a messy, cluttered space can lead to mistakes, slowdown in production, and even incidents, all of which, of course, interrupt operations and negatively impact a company. So they implemented a system called 5S. And I'll explain 5S in more detail in the next few slides. So it is a system for organizing spaces so work can be performed efficiently, effectively, and safely. So this system focuses on putting everything where it belongs and keeping the workplace clean, which of course makes it easier for people to do their jobs without wasting time or without having a risk of injury. So the term 5S comes from 5 Japanese words that, when they're translated in English, are often translated to sort or tidiness. So that's where it starts. That's sort or tidiness. Set in order or orderliness. Shine or cleanliness. Standardize, and sustain or discipline. So each S represents one part of the 5-step process that works to improve the overall function of a business. So while implementing a system such as 5S can make processes and practice more efficient, but it also creates space and eliminates waste. And so from a slip, trip, and fall perspective, it results in a cleaner work area, which is more organized, where there is less clutter, which of course makes safer working conditions. So in our case, we are concerned with maintaining safe workplaces and injury reduction. Certainly making people more productive and processes more efficient is important, but our goal here at Workplace NL is in injury reduction, so we are more concerned with maintaining safe workplaces. While I'll talk about the 5S process today, there are certainly many other systems that can be used in workplaces to achieve the same outcomes. So if anybody wanted to do any further research, this is just one of the systems that you could implement in your workplace. So the 5S concept is a very practical, hands-on tool that everyone in the workplace can be a part of. So it involves assessing everything that's present in a space, removing what's unnecessary, organizing things logically, performing the housekeeping tasks, and then keeping that cycle going. So it's pretty much organize, clean, and then repeat. So the next few slides, we'll take a closer look at each part of 5S. So the first step of 5S is sort, and that involves going through all the tools, all the furniture, the materials, the equipment, or whatever you have at your workplace or in your work area to determine what needs to be present and what can be removed. So some questions that you'd ask during the sort phase would be, what's the purpose of this item? When was it last used? How frequently is it used? Who uses it? And then does it really need to be here? Does it really need to be where it currently is? And so those questions would help determine the value of each item. So a workplace might be better off without unnecessary items or items that are used infrequently, because these things can get in the way and they can take up space. So keep in mind the best people, of course, to assess the items in a space are the people that are actually working in that space or using those tools or equipment, because those are the ones that can answer the questions best. So when it's determined that some items aren't necessary, so then you consider, what do we do with it? Does it go to a different department? Do we recycle it? Do we throw it away? Do we sell it? Or do we put an item in storage? Just do we take it out of where it currently is and put it somewhere so it can be stored? So for cases where an item's value is uncertain, so for example, maybe you have a tool. It hasn't been used recently, but somebody thinks it might be needed in the future. Then you can use what's referred to as the red tag method. So you can see there on the screen. So red tags are usually just cardboard tags or stickers that you can attach to the item, and then the user would fill out information about the item. So, where it came from, so the location, a description, the name of the person who's applying the tag, and of course the date that the tag was applied. So then the item will be placed in what you'd call a red tag area with other questionable items. So, and then if after a designated amount of time, so perhaps a month or two, or whatever the company determines would be a sufficient amount of time, if it hasn't been used, so then it's time to remove it from the workplace. So it's not worth hanging on to things that never get used, since of course they take up space. And a little bit of a tip here, I guess, as a reminder, is that you could set a reminder on your phone or on your computer, or post it somewhere in the workplace to check back in with the red tag area so it doesn't get forgotten. So if the workplace determines that a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever time frame is sufficient for holding on to things in the red tag area, then some sort of a reminder to go back and check in with that area to make sure then you actually make a decision as to what you're going to do with it. Is it, to recycle it or throw it out or sell it? Essentially to remove it from the workplace. So the next step is set in order, or orderliness is the concept of identifying, clearly visible, easily accessible, designated locations for everything that's needed to do the job. So once the extra clutter is gone from the sorting process, it's easier then to see what's what. So now your work group can come up with their own strategies for sorting through the remaining items. So you've gone through your sort phase, you've got a red tag, you remove things out of the workplace. So now what's remaining? What do we need to do with it? So things to consider: which people or workstations use the items that you have left? When are they used? Which items are used more frequently? Should the items be grouped by type? Where would it be most logical then to place those items, again, based on who's using them and how frequently they're used? Would some placements be more ergonomic for workers than others? Would some placements cut down on unnecessary motion? And what that means is that if I work at workstation A, but I actually have to go to, 10 meters over to get the tool to bring it back to my workstation, is it better off having that tool stored at my workstation? So cutting down on those unnecessary motions. Or are more storage containers necessary to keep things organized? So during the set in order phase, everyone should determine what arrangements are most logical. So that will require thinking through the tasks, thinking through the phases of a task or the steps of the task, the frequency then of those tasks, the paths that people take through their workspace, and things of that nature to try to be more logical about cutting down on unnecessary movements. And of course, making sure that everything is set in order of where it should be. So downtime or waste is increased if equipment needed for the job must be found because it's not in its right place, you know, especially if you're in an organization that has multiple shifts. So every item, every tool, and every piece of equipment must have a home where it can always be found when it's needed. So a place for everything and everything in its place promotes good housekeeping and ensures that the work environment has a reduced risk of slips, trips, and falls. And there's many ways that this can be done. You know, you can use labels. There can be color coding, there can be designated bins for certain tools, it could be signs, there could be floor or wall markings, barriers, shadow boards where you're going to set things in order, all things that you can use to designate something's home, where something is supposed to be stored when it's not being used. Everyone thinks they know what housekeeping is, but it's one of the easiest things to overlook, especially when work gets busy. So the shine or the cleanliness stage of 5S focuses on cleaning up the work area, which means, you know, whether it's sweeping, mopping, dusting, wiping down the surfaces, putting the tools and materials away, so whatever that is, cleaning up the area, shining it up. It is the process of routinely cleaning and inspecting all work areas, the tools, and the equipment. So of course, you've gone through the sorting, you've gone through the setting in order, so now there is room to do that cleaning. So in addition to basic cleaning, shine also involves performing regular maintenance on equipment and machinery. So planning for maintenance ahead of time, of course, means that businesses can catch problems and be preventative and try to prevent breakdowns. And of course, that then equates to less wasted time and no loss of profits related to work stoppages. So you can see how the 5S system not just increases safety in a workplace, but if your organization is concerned about or interested in, you know, lean and being efficient, then 5S is a huge contributor to that, or implementing a 5S system would certainly help in reducing waste. So shining the workplace might not sound exciting, but certainly it is important, and it shouldn't be just left up to janitorial staff. So in 5S, everybody takes responsibility for cleaning up their workspace, and ideally that's done on a daily basis. So doing so makes people take ownership of the space, which in the long run means people will be more invested in their work, which certainly will translate hopefully then to be invested certainly in the success of the company. So how to clean may seem obvious, but make sure people know how to properly shine their spaces. Show employees, especially the new employees, which cleaners to use, where cleaning materials are stored, how to clean the equipment, particularly if it's, you know, it's equipment that could be easily damaged. So once the first 3 steps of 5S are completed, things should start to look pretty good. All the extra stuff is gone, everything is organized, spaces are cleaned, and equipment is in good working order. So the problem is, when 5S is new at a company, it's easy to clean and get organized, and then slowly let things slide back to the way they were. So Standardize makes 5S different from the typical type of spring cleaning project. So Standardize systematizes everything that just happened and turns a one-time effort into a habit. So Standardize assigns regular tasks, it creates schedules, and it posts instructions. So these activities become part of people's daily routine. So it makes standard operating procedures for 5S so that orderliness doesn't fall by the wayside. So without work instructions, operations slip away from the standards identified to be the most effective. So depending on the workspace, a daily 5S checklist or maybe some kind of chart might be useful. It could be posting a schedule indicating how frequently certain cleaning tasks must occur and who is responsible for them. You know, that could also be another helpful tool to hold people responsible and accountable for the tasks. So initially, people will probably need reminders about 5S. So small amounts of time may need to be set aside daily for doing the 5S tasks. But then over time, the goal would be that the tasks would become routine and 5S organizing and cleaning will become part of a regular work. So making sure that everyone knows their responsibilities of performing the sorting, the organizing, and the cleaning. And that goes back to the RACI acronym. So who's responsible, who's accountable, everybody's consulted, who needs to be informed. And again, there are some visual cues that you can use to standardize 5S. Again, signs, labels, posters, the floor marking tape, any tool organizers, they may also play an important role. So they can provide directions and keep items in place in many cases without even having to verbalize anything. You know, if there's a poster, if there's a designated area, then you're providing that instruction even without words on a regular basis. And once the standard procedures for 5S are in place, businesses must perform the ongoing work of maintaining those procedures and updating them as necessary. So sustain refers to the process of keeping 5S running smoothly, but also of keeping everyone in the organization involved. So worker input is valuable for identifying improvements. So encouraging feedback from staff to see how things are going, if there's areas that they feel need improvement. So managers need to participate, do as do employees, out on the manufacturing floor or in the warehouse or in the office or whatever type of workspace you have. So sustain is about making 5S a long-term program, not just, as I mentioned, a short-term project or like a spring cleaning project. Ideally, 5S becomes part of the organization's culture, and when it is sustained over time, that's when businesses will start to notice this continuous positive result. So the goal is to ensure that the 5S approach is followed, and this will require ongoing effort and continuous improvement. Sustained change is often said to be the most challenging step, as everyone involved must feel empowered to maintain the order and cleanliness and make the standards a way of life. So it involves training and communicating, and that hopefully will foster a culture of self-disciplined workers. So pretty much what that translates to is, people doing it without being told. So people practicing and implementing 5S without being told. So performing regular audits will ensure that there is no deviation from your 5S standards. When issues arise, root causes, of course, need to be identified and then actions implemented in a timely manner in order to avoid deviating any further from your standards. So to help sustain the 5S practices, it's important to make sure that all new employees or even employees who are switching departments receive training about their area's 5S procedures. So guys, that is 5S. That's the steps associated with 5S. So even though 5S is a fairly simple concept, beginning a new program certainly can feel daunting. It's like undertaking a big cleaning project, whether it's in your garage or in your basement at home. There's a lot of stuff to deal with, and getting started probably doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. But where do you start? So start with practical steps, such as deciding which departments, which individuals will be involved, what training might be needed, and what tools do you need to facilitate the process. Essentially, what do you need, what resources do you need to start the process in your workplace to hopefully make it effective. Determining these concrete things will help begin the process of 5S implementation. So the short answer to the question of who should participate is everyone. If a department is starting 5S, then managers and all other employees should be included. If anyone is left out, that could lead to confusion or could lead to messes that people, don't want to take ownership of and don't want to clean up. It is possible that some people, may play a bigger role in 5S than others, and that's also fine. There might be 5S coordinators who are in charge of, installing and maintaining, maybe it's labeling, or keeping track of assigned tasks, or, going back and checking on the red tag area, or introducing new department members to the system. And that's okay. You may want to designate someone to lead the change. And these people will obviously spend a lot more time thinking about 5S compared to others. But everyone should think about it regularly, though. Like, it should be something that is always there in the back of someone's mind as they're going through their daily routine. So 5S might initially take place as an event, to kickstart or to get you started, but ideally it becomes a part of daily work for everyone. So it is also important to remember that company leaders should participate in 5S, especially if 5S is going to be a company-wide effort or initiative. And of course, it's like anything, when people see their superiors or their supervisors taking 5S seriously by participating in it, then they're going to be more likely to take it seriously too. All right, so Tina's telling me it's time for our micro break. So you can walk through a quick stretch with me if you wish. If not, you can certainly take a bathroom break, or get up, get yourself a glass of water, or do your own stretch. And of course, when you're stretching, always do what's comfortable for you, and of course it's not meant to cause any type of pain or anything of that nature. So what I'm going to do, I've been sitting, so I'm just going to stand up, and I'm going to put my feet just shoulder width apart, and I'm going to stand so my chest is proud and my shoulders are relaxed or down out of my ears, and I'm standing up nice and straight. And I usually feel a lot of tension in my neck and my shoulders, so I'm going to do a little stretch for that this morning. So I'm just going to take my right ear and try to lower it down to my right shoulder. And just going as far so I can feel just a slight stretch on the left side of my neck. Now, if you want to get a little bit more of a stretch, certainly feel free to reach up with your right hand and just kind of pull down a little bit on your head there. Try to pull your ear closer to your shoulder. And you can just hold that for a few seconds. Then you're going to bring your head back to center. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the left side. So lower your left ear to your left shoulder. And again, if you want a little bit more of a stretch, you can use your left hand and just put it on the top of your head and press down a little bit. Just feeling a slight stretch. Then you're going to come back to center. Then you're going to try to touch your chin off your chest. You should feel that up through the back of your neck. And again, if you want a little bit more of a stretch, just use your fingers to press down on the back of your head there. All right, you bring your head back to center. I'm just going to stretch out my arms a little bit. So if you stretch out your arms behind your back, then clasp your hands together and just push towards the wall while you're clasping together. Again, just feeling that slight stretch. All right, shake it all out. I'm going to get started again, but if you feel like you need to continue on, then by all means do so. So education and training is important. So anyone who will participate in 5S activities needs to receive training. So that could be done whether it's in a classroom, with a training video, and there's some great YouTube videos on 5S, or it can be through some hands-on activities. So a demonstration of how 5S could occur at a workstation might also be useful. So show someone exactly what it means to, sort, to set in order, to clean. So for employees to understand why the company is going to start using 5S and why it's important, they should be given a brief history of what it is, its parts, certainly, and its benefits. And by all means, you could use, the slides from this webinar as well as a bit of an introduction into 5S. And it's quite possible that the way 5S is carried out at one organization or even one department in an organization will be different from others. So if you have, you know, a front office and then you have a warehouse in the back of your building, then how 5S looks from for your office versus how it looks for your warehouse could be a little bit different. So groups performing 5S for the first time may need to work out the best way to perform the steps of 5S in their respective spaces. So in any case, everyone should receive training when 5S is new, and then any new employees who come on board later should receive training about 5S as well. So a key part of 5S is that it makes spaces cleaner and therefore easier to navigate. So that means people can more easily get their work done. We talked about visual communication tools such as labels, floor markings, cabinet and shelf markings, and shadow boards can make navigating the spaces even simpler. So you can see there in the pictures on the slide, there's some examples of the labeling and the shadow boards and the floor markings. Plus, those kinds of tools can help keep the workspaces organized, which is a key part of 5S. So a workplace that uses visual management in this way is often referred to as a visual workplace. So as I mentioned, some of the common visual tools used in 5S are floor marking tape. So these tapes can be used to outline work cells, mark the location where the equipment or materials are placed, or it can be used to highlight hazards. They come in a variety of colors and patterns and can also be used on shelves or workbenches or cabinets or any other surfaces. For labels and signs, so these visuals use text or colors and symbols to convey information. They can indicate the contents of what's in a drawer. They can identify or call out hazards or tell people where to store certain parts. Many styles and sizes certainly exist, and some businesses even choose, to make their own in-house with, a label and a sign printer or a label maker. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. And then there's shadow boards and toolbox foam. So these visuals are helpful in workspaces, that have a lot of tools. So shadow boards use cutouts of tools that are placed behind the spot where the tool hangs on a pegboard. And the toolbox foam works similarly, except it fits into the toolbox drawer, and the tool shape is cut out of the top layer of foam so that a bright bottom layer of foam shows through. And then both of these methods highlight the missing tools and tell people exactly where the tools should be placed when they're finished using them. So businesses may choose to use some or all of these visual tools. All of them help achieve the often cited saying of, and I quoted it previously in the webinar, a place for everything and everything in its place. So these tools make it clear where things belong so clutter doesn't become a problem so easily. And of course, if you use, color-coded floor markings or tape or anything else that's color-coded, then you have to make sure that everyone understands what that color code is. So it could be posting the color chart if necessary. So you may be saying, I don't have a warehouse, or I'm not a manufacturing facility, so it doesn't apply to me. On the contrary, a system like 5S can be applied to any organization. So while 5S originated in the manufacturing industry at Toyota, it has proven useful for many industries, not just the automobile industry. In recent decades, 5S has moved beyond manufacturing to other industries such as healthcare. And there's also many office buildings that also implement 5S, as do some schools and some other government organizations. So the basic steps of 5S can be applied to any workplace. Regardless of what your industry is. An office can use 5S to keep supplies organized, so can hospitals and medical clinics. 5S can be used in a communal kitchen to help keep the fridge from piling up with expired food. It's really just a matter of determining what workspaces and work processes will benefit most from, improved workplace organization. So business leaders considering using 5S may wonder if 5S is going to be expensive to implement. So generally it's not. There may be an upfront investment, if you have to get some floor marking tape or labels, or if you want to get some, you don't want to make your own shadow boards or foam toolboxes and you want to buy those. And some time does need to be spent on training and 5S activities, which will take up time. But in the long run, 5S makes processes run more smoothly and prevents mishaps, and those things, usually save businesses money. So we know the importance of housekeeping and the benefits of having housekeeping processes, but the question becomes then, how do you motivate people to participate in cleaning and in housekeeping? So whether you're supervising a bunch of, 5-year-olds or 50-year-olds, housekeeping is never really going to be high on anyone's priority list. There always seems to be something that's more urgent or necessary or even just appealing, something more appealing to do. But cleaning up certainly is an essential part of every project, and it's a necessary daily activity in the workplace. So messiness poses safety hazards for everyone. So how do you convince your team then to clean up and everybody to do their share? And how do you turn housekeeping into a habit? Well, you don't need to sing songs or hand out stickers like you would for 5-year-olds, but you do need to make it a priority and make it interesting. So here are some suggestions, of what to do and what not to do. Excuse me. So do champion housekeeping early and often. So you'll need to make the case to your workforce that cleanliness matters. Your employees should be keenly aware of the benefits of cleaning up and how less clutter means less stress, fewer incidents, and better workflow, and hopefully then less frustration. Don't rely on scare tactics. Focus on the positive aspects of your housekeeping program rather than dwelling completely on the bad stuff that could happen if we don't clean up. So studies show that even minor rewards and forms of encouragement can be stronger than fear in terms of motivating action and change. Do provide evidence, with examples. So whether it's before and after pictures, like I'm going to show you, or if you find some case studies from organizations that have completed 5S projects, there's plenty of evidence out there about how effective housekeeping systems can be. And again, like I said up front, it doesn't have to be 5S. Don't try to do everything at once. So be careful not to present housekeeping as a massive undertaking or a daunting task. So you can't expect your employees to focus all their time on 5S, nor can you expect it to be done within a day or two. So it's likely going to take several days, if not weeks, or maybe even months to complete the stages, or just stage 1 and 2, just the sorting and the setting in order. Divide everything into simple tasks, activities that are easy to start and finish, which don't require a long time commitments, can be a great way to get started. Assign tasks to various employees so everyone is accountable and they're participating, and no one person is overloaded. Housekeeping should be embedded in everyday work. For instance, an employee uses a tool, should be responsible then for wiping down the work surfaces and putting the tool away when they're finished with it. Don't spring it on your employees. So the 5S system can significantly disrupt operations and can fail as a result if project or program managers aren't careful about introducing it to the workforce. And again, it goes back to a previous slide, and we talked about explaining to them what 5S is, why it's important, and why you're, as an organization, you're going down the road of implementing a housekeeping system. Do take your time. Provide a long project runway. So be realistic about how long 5S will take. 3 months is a typical timeline. Give advance notice, as I mentioned. Inform your employees about the initiative well before kickoff. It's not unusual for organizations adopting 5S to give advance notice several months before beginning the program. And supply guidelines, not deadlines. It's perfectly okay to provide your operations with recommendations about how long each step should take. However, you have to try to resist the urge to micromanage operations beyond that point, and then trust your maybe it's your 5S coordinator or your supervisors to make the call about when these things get done. So it may cause you to lose a little sleep in the short run, but it will ultimately win you more allies and hopefully a high compliance rate in the long run. And don't expect employees to get it right immediately. So as with any workforce initiative, 5S necessitates training and practice. So employees will need to learn the system. There will be mistakes, there will be gaps, there might be some delays, and the mess may seem to get worse before it actually gets better. But just take a deep breath and certainly be patient with the process. But be consistent. Don't let unwanted materials pile up. So one of the most difficult parts of 5S can be disposing of the unneeded or the unwanted items, particularly if you have any element of wanting to hoard. So you can't just dump everything, but you can't allow it to continue taking space either. So look for opportunities, to reuse, to reallocate or sell what you aren't using. Those materials may not be of use to employees in other departments or locations or to your neighbors, they may be of use. So see if you can give them to somebody else. In any case, consider formally designating someone as a disposable manager to ensure the process runs smoothly. And then the last one there is do get leadership involved. So one of the most powerful motivators, as I mentioned, is commitment and leading by example. So communication from the top that this is something that the organization cares about and is paying close attention to is important. To avoid confusion and of course duplication of efforts, leadership should be in charge of standardizing, implementing, and measuring and monitoring the 5S program. So in other words, housekeeping needs to involve the whole house. Cleaning up, much like workforce safety, is everyone's job. In fact, the two are frequently used one and the same. So let's look at some examples. So before 5S, spaces are cluttered and confusing. And then after 5S, everything has an assigned place, which is often marked with floor marking, tape, labels, and other visual cues. So when 5S is used in the workplace, it's easier to detect hazards and spot potential problems before they grow into significant issues. So here are some examples. So in this case, the organization used a combination of marking tape and wall labels to sort and set in order tools and equipment. So these pictures depict the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. So the marketing and communications team at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow produce a high volume of materials to promote the university and facilitate the achievement of their ambitions, which is student recruitment. So these materials include university art supplies, photographic materials, as well as stationery that supports their work. Over time, excess supplies of those materials occupied the full capacity of a storeroom that they had and was encroaching on the office workspace, which was detrimental to the team's working environment. So what changes were implemented? The whole team received training on the concepts and benefits of workplace management using the 5S approach. Using the activities during the training, the team created an action plan to improve their working environment. The team examined every item in storage and categorized its usage and need. They nominated team members to look at the remaining materials and designed a structure to allow clear identification and access to the items they actually needed. So labeling, you can see there on the shelves. The space was organized into areas for stationery, with identification labels, and a reorder level, a storage area, and a new quiet workspace to allow employees an area to focus away from the activity of the office. So at the end of the day, what was achieved? It was an improved and more effective working environment for that team. In this case, it was a shop environment, and the organization went through quite a transformation. Everyone came together to sort, set in order, shine, and standardize the shop. Oh, there's the alarm, guys. We'll just take a second. You can see there in the pictures that was quite a difference made in that shop. So they actually had an event. They kickstarted their 5S with an event. So the goal of their event was to provide a safer, more efficient workplace for everyone and to be a better supplier for their customers. The first day of the event was sort. The shop disposed of several truckloads of excess materials and equipment that was taking up valuable space in the shop. That freed up 400 square feet of space that could be put to better use, and inventory levels to maintain were also established. Next came the set in order on day 2. This began with rearranging and figuring out the best place for everything. Floors were marked so that everyone would know where to place the raw materials, where the walkways were, and so on. The offenders joined together to decide where things would be best to save time and steps, produce a better workflow, and reduce movement of materials. Other changes included painting the fire extinguisher columns red, marking locations of the fire alarm poles and electrical panel clearance areas, and reallocating the flammable cabinets as per standards. After the sort and set in order, it was time to shine, so the shop was swept and dusted and mopped and scrubbed until the shop was, well, shiny, they say. On day 4, the standardizing of everything began, which is still a work in progress for them. In the weeks following the event, the shop installed better lighting, pole-mounted fans and hose reels to free up floor space and reduce tripping hazards, and location signs were placed all around the shop. The workers were busy, certainly trying to complete all the tasks. The hardest step of 5S is sustain, as old habits die hard. But they say everyone was happy with the new setup of the shop and the improved working conditions, and that helps them and provides them with the motivation to sustain all the changes that were made. And here we see the tool the tool shadow boards or foam used for setting in order. And as I mentioned, 5S can apply to an office environment as well. It just looks a little bit different, and it will for every workplace, and as I mentioned, even every department. And it can even be applied to individual cabinets within a workplace. So this looks to be like a first aid type of cabinet. So according to CCOHS, good housekeeping is the first and most important and fundamental level of preventing falls due to slips and trips. So without good housekeeping practices, any other preventative measures such as the installation of, sophisticated flooring or getting specialty footwear or training on walk-safe techniques are never going to be fully effective without good housekeeping practices. So I've mentioned that there's plenty of reasons to practice good organizational housekeeping. It ensures businesses run smoothly, it can boost morale, and create a positive impression for visitors, and that's just to name a few. But the primary reason to clean things up, the reason we're here, certainly is safety. So housekeeping is a crucial part of any environment, health, and safety program. And perhaps the most powerful strategy for eliminating the #1 form of workplace incidents, so slips, trips, and falls, is housekeeping. Many companies are going a step further than 5S and following a 6S system, with safety then being the 6th S. The idea behind 6S is not to only prioritize safety as an outcome of the program, but to embed safe work practices within the housekeeping. So in other words, the goal is to create a safer environment and stay safe while you're doing it. So here are a few examples of 6S in practice. So setting up workstations to improve ergonomics, so workers aren't using the same muscles all day and potentially suffering these repetitive motion injuries or the MSIs. Marking intersections to ensure that forklift operators won't collide with each other or pedestrians, so having aisles of traffic in your warehouses. And using signs to label storage cabinets containing cleaning chemicals so that workers are aware of the presence of hazardous substances. So there are some common issues to watch out for, and of course the big one, particularly during Fall Prevention Month, is slip, trip, and fall hazards. So keep an eye out for equipment and materials that could cause someone to fall. So unsecured air hoses, lying extension cords, parts laid out on the floor, or spills that aren't cleaned up, and so on. If any of those hazards are present, it may be only a matter of time then before someone actually slips, trips, and falls. So keep in mind that many falls lead to severe injuries to workers' backs, hips, and knees, and certainly causes people to miss work for extended periods of time. You're also going to be looking for fire hazards, so exposed wiring, poor chemical storage, loose papers in a file cabinet. Organizations can reduce their fire risk, again, by labeling and documenting all known flammable or combustible materials. And then any excess materials that could catch on fire should be stored away from electrical equipment or disposed of if possible. Then looking for blocked aisles. So aisle clearance minimizes the risk of falling objects in forklift accidents. So you've probably seen a dozen videos where a forklift operator drives down an aisle and collides with, racking. And then the whole structure, tumbles down. Such videos show the importance of keeping aisles clear, making sure then that pedestrians have walkways and that the walkways are wide enough and that they are unobstructed. And forklift paths should be clear. So it goes back to, as I mentioned previously, having designated areas of travel. Blocked exit paths. So that one is simple, and yet many organizations fail to address it properly. Always make sure there's nothing blocking any exit out of a facility. So don't stack boxes or store objects directly in front of doors or exit paths. And this is where the floor marking tape, provides a great visual cue. And then probably using signage along with that tape indicating that there's nothing to be stored inside the tape. And of course, obstructed emergency equipment. So as with exit paths, you can't afford to have anything blocking your fire extinguishers, your eyewash stations, or your electrical panels, or any other emergency equipment that you have. So, any second wasted can cause a catastrophe. It could be a life-altering injury, or it could even be, death and property loss. So if there's an electrical issue, you need to be able to shut off electrical panels as quickly as possible. If there's a fire, you need to be able to access an extinguisher without having to try to move something out of the way. So if someone is exposed to a hazardous chemical as well, they need to be able to have access to an eye wash or a shower station, rapidly. And that means like within 10 seconds or so. So keep in mind that anybody who needs an eye wash probably can't see. So if there's a pallet of materials in their way, or if there's electrical cords draped across the floor that are in front of the eye wash station, there's a good chance then that person is going to bang into something, or that they're going to trip. So again, these are just a few things to keep in mind when we talk about, 6S, or the sixth S being safety, meaning you're integrating safe practices within your housekeeping. So at this point, you know the difference a comprehensive approach to cleaning can make. But let's say you don't have the time, or you don't have the resources to implement it, or a system such as 5S at your company at a high level. So perhaps you run a small business and you just don't have the capacity for the full 5S approach. So you can still save your company money, you can still reduce injuries, and create a better environment overall for yourself and your employees by starting with a few simple steps. Clean up after yourself. Make housekeeping a priority. Recognize employees that keep their work areas clean, and encourage, those that don't to start to implement housekeeping procedures. Institute a routine clean schedule. So just like, at home or anyone else, cleaning is an ongoing job. So you need to create a schedule to make sure housekeeping becomes a routine. You may want to include safety equipment inspections in that schedule as well, if you don't have it as part of your formal workplace inspections. Have someone check your fire extinguishers, your eye wash stations, and so on, or any other emergency equipment you have. Store flammables, sharps, and other hazards properly. So anything that can cause injury or illness needs to be organized and put away first. If nothing else, just, clean up your hazards. And keep tools and materials organized. So find a place for everything. Many organizations use tape, as we mentioned several times now, to designate where things go. You know, that makes it easier for a worker to find what they may be looking for and to keep areas clean. So again, if you don't have the capacity to do a full 5S approach, there are still many things that you can do in the workplace to make sure that you have good housekeeping. So guys, Tina's telling me it's time for a final micro break, but we're actually almost done, and I just have a handful of slides left, so I'm going to press on. But again, feel free to get up and move around if you feel like you need another little stretch. So I guess a final thought to leave you with is that housekeeping order is maintained, not achieved. So cleaning and organization must be done regularly, not just at the end of a shift. So integrating housekeeping into jobs can help ensure that that is done. So guys, thanks for tuning in today to talk about housekeeping in 5S. I just have a few more slides there, just a few administrative things to go through with you. So upcoming webinars, I mentioned that tomorrow we have our last Fall Prevention Month webinar in our series. It's the hierarchy of fall protection. Next week, we have evaluating MSI risk or musculoskeletal injury risk. There's tools for that. That's on November 24th. We have preventing hand injuries on November 25th, and I see that Tina just put the link there to the website, so in your chat window, so you can see a full list of all our webinars and how to register for those if you are interested. To receive updated information on prevention services, workshops, and webinars, again, you can visit our website at workplacenl.ca. You can click view all events. And then you can also subscribe as well to receive or get on our email subscription list and to get monthly emails about our upcoming workshops and webinars. As I mentioned, your feedback is important, so please take the time to complete the evaluation. And Tina's right on the ball there this morning. She's also putting in the link there for our subscription list. And so on this slide here, we talk about the new app. So there was an app developed by Workplace NL in partnership with Digital Government Service NL and the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. When downloaded on your device, you can search and browse summaries and legislation. When connected through the internet or Wi-Fi, you can view resources and links. You can submit feedback about the app and receive update notifications. So when you are connected through Wi-Fi, you can easily access the selected websites through quick links and receive update notifications, as I mentioned. When browsing the app offline, you can search and browse the OSH regulation and related materials. You can copy and paste selected content. You can email parts of the regulation and related materials, and you can submit feedback about the app. So your feedback is important to us. If you have any questions or feedback about the OSH Guide app or the Occupational Health and Safety Guide app, please email us at info@workplacenl.ca. So guys, again, thanks so much for your participation and your attendance this morning. I appreciate it. If you have any questions specifically about the webinar, or I guess any occupational health and safety question in general, you can reach out to me. My email address is there on the slide, and Tina also put it in your chat box there, as well as my phone number, my direct line. If you have any other general questions about Workplace NL, feel free to contact an office nearest you. So again, thanks for your attendance this morning, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in person in 2022 for some of our workshops. Stay safe.